Hello and welcome to the Grizzled Warmaster. My name is Doug, and today we're going to do another one of our AOS Has a Problem videos. And today we're going to look at heroes. Age of Sigmar has a real hero problem. And I know there's a careful balance between hero hammer and heroes being, I don't want to say useless, but very swingy. Some being super effective and some being not effective at all. But let's dive into this problem. Some of the problems we have with heroes are, one, they often cost equal to many units in the game, often very much more than a unit, but generally have fewer wounds and are just as easy or easier to remove than a comparably priced unit. Heroes just don't feel heroic in Age of Sigmar right now. Generally speaking, there are a few that definitely seem very heroic, and there are a few that provide way more value than their point costs. But generally speaking, that's not always the case. A lot of heroes feel like they are a necessary component to make an army work the way it should, rather than, but can be easily removed by most of the competitive armies. They rather than feel like a real leader on the battlefield and a real, like heroic focus to your army, they just feel like cogs in the machine that have to be there in order for your army to work properly, which I don't think is the best place to be in. Most competitive armies gain their effectiveness from their allegiance abilities or inherent unit abilities, and that can include heroes, not heroes handing out bonuses. Let's look at Caradron Overlords, for example. I have seen many a battle report with Caradron Overlords where the heroes essentially don't do anything. I know that, for example, a recent battle report from Mini Wargaming, I think it was Josh who was playing Caradron Overlords. He forgot he had an alchemist, or whatever they're called. I think they're alchemists. He forgot he even had that hero in one of his boats. That hero was not necessary for the army to function the way it should. In some armies, like, for example, the OCR Bone Reapers, having heroes give you some of the, your relentless discipline points you need to function. But, and they hand out, cool command abilities, but otherwise they're not necessarily necessary for that army to function. Unlike a lot of death armies where you need the heroes just to keep your guys animated. But that's a different story. But just think about those armies that are the most effective. Caradron Overlords, the Disciples of Tzeentch. What do the Disciples of Tzeentch heroes do? They don't make units necessarily more effective. They themselves are putting out damage, or they are controlling the battlefield, or they are, possibly moving another unit around, or, they function as part of the army, not just there to enhance the army. Which, some factions run into that problem. Let's look at Stormcast Eternals, for example, where a Lord Celestant is supposed to be a combat hero who's, you would be better off spending those 100 points on Liberators if you wanted combat out of them. But he also hands out that +1 to hit, which, drives up his cost comparative to what he does in combat, but realistically rarely comes into play. Same thing with, there are some heroes that are in, let's look at Seraphon, for example. There are some super effective bonus handing out heroes in those armies. Many of the skink priests and, Star Masters and stuff, they're very good at handing out bonuses. But that's what you're paying for. You're not paying for, limited combat abilities. And that army doesn't require those to function. It just pumps them up a notch. So, so there's got to be a middle ground. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Some buffing heroes like we mentioned here, like the Lord Celestant, are too fragile to reliably provide their buff. Lord Celestant's got decent armor, but he's required to be in the front line in hand-to-hand combat to hand out his bonus. So he's not going to last that long with his 5 wounds. That happens with a lot of other heroes. They've got a 5+ armor save, they've got 5 wounds, and they provide a critical bonus to your army. Heroes in general aren't able to stand up to concentrated attacks, so even those heroes that provide a really good bonus, they are somehow very effective and integral to your army, can be burned down super quick. Again, let's look at again, Kharadron Overlords are, we can all probably agree, too powerful right now. But just as an example, the new kids on the block, the Lumineth Realm Lords, have some really great stuff in their armies, including Teclis. But I have seen Teclis be burnt down in turn 1 before he even got to go by a Kharadron Overlords list. So even somebody sitting up there with a 4-up save, the ability to give himself a 3-up save as a reaction to that, to being attacked, with 16 wounds, still wasn't able to stand up to concentrated attacks. So and we're going to talk in another video about monsters, and I talk a little later in this video about monstrous heroes. That's a different related problem, but the fact remains that pretty much if a hero needs to die, it is very often pretty easy for a competitive army to do it. Some armies do struggle with taking out heroes. They don't have the best shooting attacks, or they don't have the best ability to put out mortal wounds, and a hero, gaining Lookout Sir, or, situated behind defensive troops, might be able to weather certain armies, but others, they're going to be gone in turn 1. Even heroes with tons of defense often have one weakness that can be reliably exploited. Let's look at the Light of Eltharion. He should be a beast with a 3-up ethereal save and taking half damage from everything. And 7 wounds, which is good. He should be able to stick around for a long time, but he's without Teclis, or providing his protection of Teclis, or somebody providing him protection of Hish. Those really powerful, highly competitive armies are going to be able to take him out pretty quickly, which makes him not quite worth his 220 points, even though he is offensively and defensively very strong. I see they've kind of are trying to address that with the new hero, Sigvald, I think his name is, from the Hedonites. He comes with a 4-up after save, so that should keep him around a little longer. But even he, if you wanted to focus him down, very much could. So anyways, that heroes, even with tons of defenses piled on them, which drive up their cost, can be reliably taken down. Well, not reliably. By the most competitive armies can be reliably taken down. Many heroes often pack too many bells and whistles in one package, which also drives up their cost, and those bells and whistles aren't always effective. You can put too many good things into one person, making them mediocre at many of them, but way too expensive for what you really want them to do. Take, for example, again, I play Stormcast, I play Lumineth Realm Lords, so I bring those up a lot. But Stormcast Wizards, in my opinion, are all overpriced because they have that 4-up armor save, and because they get a couple more or I think 1 more attack, maybe 2 more attacks than the average wizard gets with their D3 weapon. So because of that, they cost more points. They often 20, 40, maybe even 60 more points than a wizard in another faction might cost. All right, so let's take some ideas for how to address these problems. Some solutions to fragility might be, and I'd love to see this in 3rd edition, allow heroes to join units again. like in fantasy. I would say if you're going to do that, they have to match the keyword. Infantry team up with infantry, cavalry with cavalry, so on. And then if they have auras or single target buffs that, but not their command abilities, those should be limited to the unit they join. So if you're going to add them to, you have to weigh those odds there. Do I put this hero in this unit knowing he's more protected, but his bonus can only go that one place? Or do I risk him out in the open? So it gives you choices. Also, make heroes harder to target with ranged attacks and abilities. Again, we can borrow this from 40k. You know, maybe don't allow them to be shot if they're not the closest model. There might be some problems with this. And still have access to Lookout Sir was the other one I had. Even if they aren't the closest, even if they are the closest model, so they could be targeted. Still allow them to have Lookout Sir. Now, the problem with this is, and I guess it's becoming less so, there are fewer buffs from heroes in 40k than there are in fantasy or in Age of Sigmar. In 40k, they tend to be auras that you have to be pretty close to them to gain. It's not like you can go, oh, hey, I'm going to give these guys who are, 12 inches over here, I'm going to give them an ability of some sort. So if you were going to do this, you might see ranges on abilities shrink down, but it's something to think about. All right, let's go talk about those monstrous heroes. I think that monsters in general, and monstrous heroes especially, have some issues. One of those is degrading profiles just don't work. I understand the concept that they were going for, that if you had a similar number of points invested into a unit, that as they took damage, they would become less reliable. However, the math doesn't work on that. And I am going to do a video on the problem with monsters. And the degradation is not nearly the same. If you were to spend, for example, on Techless here, 660 points in any unit, they would almost I can't think of a unit where they would not be as effective at having taken 16 wounds as they were being fresh and full in a 660 point unit. Just because at 660 points, you could not most likely fit all of the people in that unit into combat at the same time. They would quickly, you'd run out of, even if you had the biggest ranged, 3-inch range weapons, there are going to be some people who aren't going to be able to fight. They're just not going to be able to get into combat. So those losses in wounds are just not going to have the same impact as they do currently on monsters that degrade. Additionally, now often monsters move further than a lot of units that you could replace them with, but not all. You could certainly compare them to a cavalry unit, for example. So the idea that their movement degrades is also a problem. I don't like that very much. You could, at their last profile, have their movement degrade, because at that point, yes, you could say the mount has been killed. Because generally monstrous heroes are not the monster themselves. They're a person riding a monster. So once the monster is dead, it's just the hero on that last bit of profile, then yeah, you could put them down to the regular. In general, I would like to see monsters and monstrous heroes degrade slower. Maybe only have 3 levels instead of 5 or 6. And, that first degrade down, you cut into a couple of attacks, or maybe their damage goes down a little. If they have any special abilities, maybe, for example, that aura of Selenar shrinks, that's fine. And then the last one, sure, you're going to cut down some movement. Again, fine. Even if you were going to reduce movement each time, if it were only 3 degrades, then you could, you would see less of a degradation as things go on, or as they take, wounds in between those areas where there would be, if you've taken out one of the columns or one of the rows of the degrading. The other thing I'd like to see, at least for monstrous heroes, but monsters in general too, as we'll see in the next video I put out on that, they should have inherent defense bonuses. They are supposed to be different than your base troops. They're supposed to be a little more intimidating. They should stick around a little longer, because there just isn't the same, 16 wounds of somebody who costs 660 points is not the same as 660 points of other troops on the field. They're going to have way more than 16 wounds. So you just, to give them that kind of sticking power, you need to give them something. Now, I presented this, I think, in my video on what I'd like to see come around in 3rd edition, and that's bringing back ward saves. I don't want to give every hero and every monster ethereal. I don't think that's a good idea. But giving them a save that you can't rend past a certain point. And so what I'm presenting is a ward save that is basically the invulnerable save from 40k. So you'd say, hey, he's got a 4-up armor, but he's got a 5-up ward save. So he's always going to get at least a 5 to save against normal attacks, not mortal wounds, obviously. You also should provide most monster heroes and monsters some sort of save against mortal wounds or damage prevention roll saves, that is against wounds and mortal wounds. All monsters and especially godlike heroes should have one of these, even if it's only a 6+, because they are such a huge investment in points. It just makes sense for them to have some sort of breaking mechanism to keep them from that. And one, I just, thinking back, the new Marathi's always had this. She can only take a certain number of wounds per round, or per turn, I should say. If you want to, for example, keep the degrading profiles the way they are with 5 or 6, or, I think it's 5 and 6, or the two kind of breakdowns there. Why not have a hard break at those? When you've reached when you degrade, when you move down to the next degrade, you can't take any more wounds from that point. That could slow, the death of these big heroes. And you could even just make it less restrictive than Marathi's right now. It's just you can't take more than that in a single phase even. So, for some that would be 3 or 4 wounds. You can only take 3 or 4 wounds per phase. And then you got to wait till the next. So that, you can't just be burned down in the hero phase or the shooting phase. It takes a few phases to get through all of this. It's just some ideas out there. I hope they do something to deal with this, because it's got to be very disheartening when you put 600 points on the table, 500 points, 660, whatever it is, 800, and then they're just dead before you get to go. They're dead in one turn. They only get to interact with the opponent once, and then they're gone. I can remember a guy just absolutely losing it at the LVO last year when my Bone Reapers killed Archeon in one turn. He charged a unit of Mortek, and he had I think I had -1 or -2 to hit on him. He did next to nothing to the Mortek, and then my whole army closed in on him and chopped him down in one turn. That's got to be disheartening for somebody. I know the guy was furious when that happened. So it can happen to almost any model in the game, save Marathi, really. All right, let's some other conclusions here, some things to think about when thinking about how we can fix heroes. Or if we go down those roads, some things we're going to have to think about. One of those is, if heroes are harder to kill, their impact on the field needs to be reined in as well. Buffs should be either generally shorter in range or more focused. And I know we're seeing that in the 2 new battle tomes we just got. As of recording this, we just got the new Hedonites of Slaanesh and the new Daughters of Cain. And many of the heroes in those books have command abilities that are limited to 1 use per phase or turn. So that can help rein in a hero's impact on the field. Hero roles need to be more focused in the future. Combat heroes should just be focused on combat and have few if any buffs to the rest of the army. They should be resilient, they should hit hard, but not provide anything else to the people around them. Buffing heroes and wizards should rarely have stellar combat abilities. That's not their role. So you need to, if you're going to give them some other defenses, I don't need to have a 5-up or a 4-up armor save on them, a 3-up armor save. A 4 or 5 is good with some sort of after save or some other protection for them. And then they shine with the buffs or the spells they cast. This will allow the designers to more accurately make points reflect the true value of that hero on the field. Because, charging 200 points for a hero who does a little of this and a little of that and a little of this, who's not going to get to do any of those things very much, isn't worth his points anymore. And all of this makes me wonder if we are going to see the introduction of a core keyword type mechanic in AOS, where buffs are more directed and limited in their scope, where maybe certain buffs can only go to battle line or, something like, or battle line will get the core keyword with some other key units in an army. I don't know if that's coming. I don't know how that necessarily would work, but it's possible. So let me know what you guys think about this in the comments down below. What kind of changes would you like to see done or made to heroes? Make sure you guys hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Please share this with a friend. We're trying to build our subscriber base here. We're trying to get a community going, so we'd love to have more people join in. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys, and I will see you next time.